Hey guys, I'll be ready in about 5 minutes. Everybody excited to be back at the new fort? New tile set? Yes, as I recall, we had engaged everyone to get our mining done. Guess we probably ought to keep their mining a little tighter than it's being at the moment, so let's let them finish this floor. And we'll designate this as our entry stockpile where we'll move everything out of the wagon. Probably don't want to bring wood in because we've got a lot of wood sitting up on the surface. So we hit stone at -5. Let's go down a couple more levels, say -8. Dining room like standard. We'll move the pigs and the birds somewhere else later, but for now we're going to use the grazer stockpile for everything. And it should be the case that they're moving stuff downstairs. Okay. Those folks who have mining are doing that. That's good. drinks. Rather, we'll use the upstairs one for prepared food. We'll use this one for drinks. Break down the workbenches, pull them inside. Just a little food to move downstairs now. Plenty of room.
Summertime has come.
I actually have to look to see what things are because I don't recognize them from the tile set anymore. All right. So I've been doing a lot of setup, but I haven't really been talking much, and that's partly because I've been concentrating and I'm doing this relatively quickly to get this done for our dwarves. So let's talk about what I'm doing. Top Fortress will eventually have a drawbridge here to allow access, which can raise up. We'll sealing this over. I'm not going to worry about making this into a firing platform in this fort. This is just going to be a bunker. We'll seal it up. The end. Done. Um, Going down, we can make this into surface farming later. This will be underground farming, pasture space, food processing, raw food storage, temple, uh, prepared food, dining hall, tavern, and barracks off to the left, or wherever. Hindsight, I probably ought not do that just yet. Drinks, and then on this narrower floor, what I'm trying to do here is there's a lot of space on my workshop floors in the older version that isn't used, but it's hit by pathfinding. If you go back and you look at the designs, it looks very pretty. We've got all these workshops all very centered, but the problem is there's a lot of dead space past the workshops out to the edge of the areas that's not used. Now, there's a couple ways you could address that. You can combine workshop and stockpile in the same floor, and we didn't do a lot of that in the prior fort. And the other thing you can do is you can make the actual floor smaller. The stockpile workshop will help because you are combining the spaces and therefore digging less floors out and therefore fewer floors out, and therefore the pathfinding will have less to go through overall. The other version will help because you are eliminating dead space that you're not using. The pathfinding will have less per floor to hit, and then overall is less impacted. Now, some of my rooms, like drinks, prepared food, temple, dining room, I do want to have a little bit of space to them. Temples need an open space for their dance floor. The prepared food and drink stockpiles will eventually be very large and need plenty of storage for them. The dining hall is best when a large number of dwarves can eat there simultaneously, even if they're not necessarily doing so. This is going to be masonry to get us started. Masons and mechanics. Now this design still has a little bit of dead space. There's a couple of squares out here at the very edges that are there. But if I go down to a 12, it's not odd, so we don't have this 3x3 floor even. And if I use 11, it's too small for the corner workshops. We lose too much away. We lose 2 in. And although you can have 4 per floor, at that point I'd still end up digging out more floors. This is probably the best compromise for being able to put 8 workshops down. We'll try to combine like workshops whenever possible. So, for example, the Craftsworks workshop is going to be 2 floors down where it can access the stone if they're doing stone crafting, and then the floor below that will be wood stockpile. Floor below that will be carpentry. This room will handle carpentry, wood furnaces, ashery, bowyer. Give our mason plenty of time to just run around and build stuff. They've already completed the wagon, or the wall. So we're going to temporarily cancel one of these jobs to provide access to the upper floor. We'll cheat and build a temporary ramp on the outside for access. We'll simply use the existing logs to floor over the ceiling, just the same way we did the wall. Done. Now, obviously, this isn't fireproof, but because of the dry moat, we've got a fire break, so that problem is solved. I'm not expecting to defend this against a dragon, so no worries there. And so to get a ceiling, we simply go to the upper floor above where we were and drop down our floor. Once that's done, the only entrance is through this opening in the wall, which will eventually have a raising drawbridge that plugs. And at that point, we can seal ourselves up in the event of an attack. This is still spring, technically. We're going to be a little slower than spring to set up. If you were in an evil area, you'd probably want to just wagon drop underground and wall it in. Now, as always with dwarves, if nobody has it, you might as well do it for everybody and get somebody to do it. And right now we have no specialist mechanics, so we might as well get one of them doing this job. And he's getting this, they're all getting this stuff built. One more. There we go. He's clearing the site. And now he's got it built. Done. Okay. Okay. And our mason has a lot of stuff to build, furniture-wise. We'll get the mechanisms done for the bridge. That will probably put a crimp in our mining for a minute. Oh, I know what we haven't done here yet. I'm assuming the cancellations there are because the item moved when they mined out underneath it, so we may get a few more. Only 2. That's rather disappointing, really. But to be fair, we haven't generated much wealth yet. We're unknown. We're in stealth mode. Almost sealed up now. We'll actually have to move those upstairs because we haven't penetrated the caverns yet. This is just temporary. I want them back downstairs as soon as possible. But all 4 of those are grazers, and they gotta be pastured where there is something to eat. And that means grass or cave moss, and we don't yet have cave moss because we haven't yet penetrated the caverns. As soon as we finish walling ourselves in a little bit here, we'll do that immediately, and then we'll be good to move them back downstairs fairly quickly. Now, this is much slower than dropping the wagon in a hole and flooring it over, which is another option. I normally don't do it, but if you're embarking somewhere unpleasant, then the speed starts to become an issue. If you think you're going to be attacked very quickly, or you're embarking somewhere that's evil, looking at wagon dropping is probably a good thing. Your cancellations will not stop this, dwarves! Alright, and then the last two should be along momentarily. Okay. And now our miner is back to clearing terrain. Now, the reason we're going longer this time is I'm going to take advantage of something else. I'm going to cut out a little down the sides. We'll drain this murky pool, although that wasn't really the intent. And force enemies to come in along not a long path, but a short path right here, in order to line them up for potential atom smashing by the bridge. Oh, I forgot. We haven't actually queued up any blocks yet. Need a few blocks for the bridge. Masons need something to do. Take a look at our idlers. Where are they at? Screwing around upstairs. Okay. Oh, dogs. I was like, what are those supposed to be? Look like wool or foxes. Okay. And the guys we've got doing mining are mining. There we go. But of course, it's a dry cave. Probably below our first cavern, which is probably somewhere around this height. It's probably cavern 2. Okay, so first things first, we convert the remaining bottom staircases above the cave to up staircases in order to prevent any traffic further down. This is a large breach. We'd have to go down several floors and wall it all in, and rather than risk that, I'm simply going to cut this off here, and then we'll redirect slightly to go around the caves in some fashion. Looks like there's a column right here as we look through the cave. So we can redirect to over here and then drop through the cave without cave levels, I guess I should say, without actually being in the cave. I'm guessing that that doesn't qualify us for cave moss. Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. Okay. Then we'll dig out the remaining staircases using channels. Be careful that you don't dig out the four in the north, east, west, and south positions and drop the center one without meaning to. You can cause a cave-in here if you're not careful. But all of the ones we're digging out have support, regardless of the staircases we remove, so we're in good shape here. And lastly, we have to build up staircases in their place. Alright, now that that's done, we're safe from anything invading that might be flying in the caverns. That's step one. Now, if we want to continue on down to figure out where the magma is, we redirect and carry on down. But I suspect that we've actually bypassed Cavern 1, probably hit a pillar in the middle of it. So we're going to go down to about floor 18 or so and dig laterally. Now we know from the World Gen settings that I gave us 15 levels from surface to first cavern, so this should be... Oh, the other thing we can do, and I should have done that first. It's not something I'm in the habit of doing. I apologize. Hang on. There is a trick, obviously. You can build farm plots. Now, farm plots can't be built unless they're on mud or soil. So if it's water, you won't hit anything. But for example, if we go up to our pasture space, and let's say that was a cave, you'd get this green where there's space that can be built. Now, most cave spaces are of two types. There's soil and there's water. So eventually we will find, if there is one, like this one, the cave. Apparently there isn't one in our vicinity. I'm kind of shocked. Wow. That really is Cavern 1. Wow. Okay, well, since that's Cavern 1, we'll redirect and carry on down. I kind of have to get some moss discovered in the caves so that we can start growing our own cave moss in our pasture space. Same as before, we turn them loose, we let them run, they mine out a new section. Away we go. The bridge should be buildable now, however, because we have lots and lots of blocks, and we'll build it out of granite. I think we've got enough granite blocks to do that. Or we can build it out of dolomite. I like dolomite. It doesn't quit when the heat's in, right? Our bridge will be 100% dolomite, baby. Okay, and the miners will proceed down through this column of rock in the caves, and then on down to discover our next cave, hopefully.
The new season is autumn.
And we'll jump to the surface and quickly build a depot. Just a temporary depot. Now, in this fort, we are well supplied enough that, reasonably speaking, we probably don't need to swipe the caravan, as it were. So right there, there's something here, and there's solid ground here. So this is cavern space here. Ground level cavern space, so we can go up a floor or two and have a reasonable expectation that we'll penetrate the caverns at the level of sky. It's not perfect. The caverns could be shorter, we could be coming in just above them. This is ground level, so we would have hit the caverns there, I believe, normally. Now, we might have multiple levels, and it's possible that as we go further down, we'll cross into the caverns again, like they go around in a circle as they descend and they pass under it. If that doesn't work, we'll dig a channel down here a little bit and see if we can't punch a hole from above. Because then we've got one square and a wall up to just floor over. And realistically, nothing's getting in unless it flies. There's another way to do this. We can go down to where we found ground floor. Let me make sure it is. If we've done this right, okay, so as far as requests go, the first request we really need is leather. We don't have the ability to produce leather in large quantities, so we'll take any leather they're willing to bring us. We don't have the ability to make large quantities of cloth, so we want to make sure they bring us cloth. We can take all the metal bars they're willing to part with. There's a use for all of them. Likewise, we can take their gems. Not because they're particularly useful in their own right, but because we can use them to augment our own crafts. They're small, they're valuable, they're lightweight. Merchants will bring a lot of them, which allows them to take away more of our stuff. Now in this case, I do want to bring seeds. Instruments I like to import. They're valuable, usually reasonably lightweight, and it saves you a lot of manufacturing effort to make your own instruments. Now, that's not to say you're going to get particularly valuable instruments or particularly high quality instruments, but even being able to have the instruments is better than not. You can throw them in your temple or your tavern and let folks have access to them. Replace them later with your own masterwork, in gem-encrusted ones if that's what you have in mind. But for now, get them up and running. While later on I won't import cats, initially I like to import a couple just to be able to get cats breeding. I don't breed them very much. I'll breed them up to 5, then we'll put an auto butcher watch on them so they'll be butchered above that. I'm a big proponent of bridge euthanization programs if necessary. Sand, as before, comes with free bags. Glass is basically a gem. Lye and potash will require significant investment from us to make them initially. Right now, it's easier to import them. Later on, we'll make them when we have industry a little better set up. Affording this stuff is going to sound like an impossible option fairly early, but we have a metalsmith's forge, we have bronze, we have a fairly high skilled weaponsmith. We can make trap components, and half a dozen high end trap components made out of bronze will buy an entire caravan. So, yeah, we could do this. And I'll take parchments because I want to be able to save our leather for manufacturing other things. I do want to have access to large quantities of books in my library, but at the same time, I don't want to burn through my animals to get there if I can avoid it. So let's go back up. Now, these things I don't import, I export. Likewise, most of these tools, if I was going to export or do something with them, it probably wouldn't be importing them. Now, you might make an exception for instrument parts. That's all these necks, body strings, bows, etc., etc., etc. You could then import the parts and assemble them, and then that way gain an instrument that wasn't directly imported. Likewise, you could add bookbinding scrolls, quires, uh, but those things I tend to manufacture from the raw materials I import rather than importing the finished goods. Now, as for animals, we could do a couple other animal types. It's worth mentioning that if you're going to branch out, oops, if you're going to branch out, the other types that are useful right out of the gate are llamas and alpacas because they provide a yarn cloth, whereas most of the other animals are only providing milk or possibly eggs and meat. Alpacas are like sheep and have three useful products. They produce the butchering products when they are expired, they produce wool during their lifetime, and they'll produce milk along the way as well. So if you were going to import a secondary grazer, it's not a bad idea to consider llamas and alpaca. Um, I'd have to double check, but I want to say there was a reason why I took sheep over the other two initially, and I have forgotten the reason. Or maybe there was no reason and I simply picked them and didn't check. I want to say they grow their fur faster, but don't quote me. Most of the other birds aren't worth importing. You could import turkeys if you're willing to consent to them being a 2-year growth cycle. You have to maintain them a little longer, but when you do, turkeys butcher as adults with more meat on them than any other bird, so you're getting more back from them when you butcher them. And they do produce a large number of eggs. So, in a 2-year growth cycle, they are far and away the best. Most of the other animals probably aren't worth importing as anything other than a source of immediate meat and skins. If you're going to do that, you then look at importing large animals like yaks and horses and donkeys, cows and bulls, so that you can immediately butcher them and have a larger supply of meat on hand. Okay, let's see what else we got. I don't normally import... Oh good, our civilization does have high boots. That's wonderful. High boots have better coverage. I have to look to see if you can modify the upstep on armor after you've generated a world. Let's see. Probably don't care about those. Picks. Trap components are an export. We could import bolts. Seeds. Nah. Good there. Plenty of wood on site. In the Glacier Fort, of course, wood would be something I would normally request. Okay, and I think that's everything. So, now we're done. This is how much you're overpaying for all of it. Let's see what they're wanting from us. Their big thing is crystal glass and leather water skins, neither of which we're going to produce in mass. Splints and cut gems. Splints aren't worth a whole lot. Cut gems we could easily do, though. That might include cut glass, for example. Not sure. Crutches, again, aren't worth a whole lot. Shields and bucklers, yeah, they're giving us a bonus, but not worth much. Earrings are interesting as an export. We can manufacture those directly, and they have out of rock, and they have only limited value to our dwarves. Otherwise, I don't see much that I'd want to export. Crossbows we would import. Tools aren't worth a whole lot individually and are usually fairly heavy. Legwear is something you put on, not something you export. Musical instruments you just saw me order imports for. Most of the rest of these are either too finicky or just not worth worrying about. So we'll probably look to do earrings as an export for this year and goblets for ourselves immediately. Oh, right, no manager. That's alright. We don't need 50 bucks just yet anyway. So we'll go down to the dining room and we'll put in our tables and chairs. That'll get the idlers doing something, hauling furniture if nothing else. And then once that's done, we can designate this as a meeting area and a meeting hall and a dining room and all that good stuff. And now it's a meeting hall and a dining room, and we'll go ahead and make it into a zone and a meeting area. Now it's not actually a tavern. We could double our tavern as our dining room, but I don't want outsiders this far into the fort. The central shaft is especially vulnerable. Enemies which accessed it have immediate, rapid access to any portion of the fort, any valuables contained therein, and all dwarves, civilian or otherwise, contained inside our fort. So, I normally would have an exclusion area here, and then some sort of, bridge or seal, a barracks and a or a barracks and a tavern, where if something goes wrong, we've got the military dwarves on site to break it up or whatever. It doesn't happen because I don't appoint a bartender. We can then have a large tavern if we want, where people can come in and party fairly close to where the dwarves are eating if necessary, so dwarves don't take much time out away from the tavern if they want to go eat. They just walk across the hall and they're settled. But that prevents the outsiders from needing to go further in. Now, the flip side of that is we're going to build a library, and the library is probably going to need similar provision. So I haven't yet figured out how I want to handle that. Because realistically, the library is going to contain valuable books, our secondary library. I suppose the solution to that is to make the secondary library somewhere else. Inside the fortress, for example. And we'll do food processing here. This will be butchers, farmers' workshops, etc. I did that backwards and eliminated the stockpile, and I shouldn't have. Now, because we have a soil layer here, we can immediately build on the soil. I removed the stockpiles, that's why I can build where I am, otherwise there would be a building in the way. We can go ahead and designate those areas as plots. Now, they'll probably get suspended. That's okay. People will come along here momentarily and be picking up the items that are blocking us because they're no longer in the stockpiles, and they'll be moved downstairs. And the Cave of the Speckled Merc has decided that we're the best place to rob, and so they've joined us for their thriving prosperity. I'm just kidding. Technically, that's made us a powerful site in our civilization. We have basically an outlying community that looks to us as a trade hub. Now we need a temporary stockpile. Our guys are not particularly good at herbalism, but we're going to send everybody out en masse to do it because we are really low on drinks right now and we need to get plants into the stockpile as fast as possible so that we can brew them. We'll set brewing on everyone, we'll set herbalism on everyone, and then we'll just let them go. And that should be enough labor free to get some herbalism. We'll get some plants, which will get us some booze. Now, obviously, this isn't a long-term sustainable strategy, which is why we need to get the farms in that we're starting to work on now. Realistically, we could have done this a lot sooner. Autumn is a very late time to start farming, but I know there's enough farming area or enough harvestable plants in this area because we've embarked in a really wooded, heavily forested, basically a tight, dense jungle of trees and plants here. So there's oodles and oodles of herbs to be picked, a lot of which will be brewable, at which point what we get from herbalism should be enough to sustain our booze until the farms can take over. Now, right now, we don't have a still. It wouldn't matter if we did. We don't actually have anywhere to. We don't actually have anything to brew at the moment. And this is going to be food processing. Now, in the milled plant category is also dye, and in order to avoid having the stockpile fill up with dyes later, we make sure we disable dye here on milled plants. Now, most of these we don't want to have in our food stockpile. Technically, these can be eaten, but I'm not really worried about them. We're not going to reduce them in any number. I don't care about milk being in this stockpile, and those aren't edible. And prepared food is right out because this is a raw food stockpile for producing food. We'll immediately allow barrels. We'll go downstairs. This is going to be a furniture stockpile, and it will store barrels and pots and nothing else. And at first, this might seem like an extravagant waste of space, but it's not, because frankly, we're going to have a lot of empty barrels and pots before we're done. This will also let me check on how many there are in the fortress without having to pop into the stock screen on a regular basis. And the furniture stockpile just for these might seem narrow, but there's a lot of jobs that depend on them, and there's a lot of food that's going to be stockpiled that can be stored in them. Okay, none of our business. If we've done this right, we should be able to cut fortifications in these last two squares and see out. I don't have anybody skilled, so everybody can do that one. Whoops. I want the drink stockpile to also be our temple. You know, I'm going to love this feature when it's finally fixed and working properly. All these temple names, it's fascinating to me how spot on. Toadie's managed to get the names for this to procedurally generate. We've got a god of darkness, and this is the invisible chapel. That's fantastically perfect, and it's completely procedural. That's wonderful. Now we got to remove the ramp before we dig out that last square. And then we've got to actually do the, digging. And our carpenter should be along momentarily to do some disassembly and earn us a lot of goodies. Come on, carpenter man. Make me reassign that to everybody. Come on, guys. Do me some disassembly here.
We need to build a trade depot.
Bet we got some of it. Now this is a temporary stockpile, so we've got it set to take from links only because we don't want it to be pulling new stuff in. It's set to give to a couple of stockpiles that hold everything. As we build specific stockpiles and things are pulled out of those, this will drain into them and they will drain into these specific stockpiles. Okay, now what I've set up here is a couple of logistics chains. Now, this is done to prevent a problem that new players often run into in their fortresses. And it's not something that new players do wrong, it's something that happens with the behavior of Dwarf Fortress items that new players don't expect. Um, when you come into Dwarf Fortress, you expect that a stockpile will hold items and that people will take items to the stockpile, and that's kind of what happens. But there's some subtle differences that cause new players some issues. Typically, in your fortress, what's going to happen with plants is something along the lines of this. A plant's going to go down to the dining hall because some dude is going to eat it, right? And when he's done, he's going to leave a seed behind. Now, what'll happen is, whoever's doing the hauling in your fortress is going to immediately try to be helpful. They're going to grab the barrel full of seeds, and they're going to take off to the dining room to pick up the seed and bring it back. Or maybe there's several others down there as well. That's the idea, anyway. The catch is, while the seeds are being hauled in the barrel, they're not available for planting, so your farmers can't plant. Now, your farmers planting is kind of an important deal. So, your farmers spam a Krabbygram, can't plant, don't have seeds, can't plant, don't have seeds, can't plant, don't have seeds. Now, the reality is you got plenty of seeds, they're just all in motion at the moment. So since you can't plant, you're kind of screwed at that moment. Now, the way you get around this is to prevent the barrel from being in motion. And the way you do that is with a logistics chain. In the outer stockpile, we accept seeds, but no barrels. And we allow that to take from anywhere, meaning people will pick up stuff in the fortress from anywhere and bring it to that stockpile. Now, they'll only bring seeds because that's what this is set to, but they'll pick them up anywhere and they'll bring them here. Then, it's set to give to the inner stockpile here immediately. At which point, this stockpile takes barrels, but only accepts stuff from the outer stockpile. So, here's how that changes things. The seed is still created in the dining room just like before, and someone goes along to pick it up, but they don't take the barrel of seeds with them when they go. They just go grab a seed. Now, if there's more than one, it's a little inefficient. You got to send multiple guys for the seeds, and yeah, that sucks. But the difference is, when they bring the seed back, they store it in the outer stockpile. Somebody immediately takes the barrel of seeds, moves 2 squares, picks up the seed, moves 2 squares, drops the barrel. This barrel is in motion for such a little time, your farmers generally don't notice. If they do, you'll get 1 tile spammed rather than 27 while they're waiting on the barrel to come back from the dining room. So this prevents a lot of the, I call them logistical issues, that you run into with farming in more recent versions of Dwarf Fortress. Now, the inner stockpile I've got set to plants just because it's convenient. It's center on the central staircase. All the farms are adjacent. If they generate plants, I want the farmers to go 2 squares, drop the plant, come back. We've got it. We can set it up to give to the raw food stockpile down below here, and then brewing and food production would have access to their raw materials fairly easily. But the plant stockpile we're talking about is like 2 floors up. And this will eventually have a stockpile just like the one above it. But for now, we'll use this one. Because the other one is kind of full with all of our stuff that we haven't moved off anywhere else yet. Garbage dump to handle our butchery byproducts. Refuse stockpile to handle the actual items before butchering.
We're here to help.
Give me a second here, guys. I'm going to step away for just a moment. Okay. As always, new folks coming in immediately go into the haulers. This is the person with only any military experience at all. The rest of our folks I've put back to their regular jobs because we got that temporary carpentry job done in order to confiscate the depot. We need to get a wood stockpile up, tell the haulers to chop a bunch of wood, pull it in the wood stockpile, and then we have the basis of our wood industry taken care of. Stone stockpile. This is our craftsman or crafts dwarves wood stockpile, and then wood workshops. Did I do that right? So this is masons. Yes, masons, stone, crafts dwarves, wood, wood workshops. Yes. burial crypts. I'm kind of a communist. Nobody gets the fancy stuff. Everybody gets buried in one of these. Now, I'd like to make exceptions for my dwarves, but generally speaking, I don't have tombs ready for just anybody. We'll end up with some for the royals because they demand them and while they're still living. But we'll also lock the damn things so nobody can actually be buried in them, and then we'll see about canceling that job when the time comes and putting them someplace where they really belong. I have very few issues with bait switching a noble's burial chamber. Now, the reason I'm offsetting this so much from the main hallway of the temple is that I'd like to kind of cut down on its impact on pathfinding. At the same time, unless I want to bury these guys in a square, we're in a round room with just rows upon rows of coffins, which is technically doable. This will kind of cut down on the pathfinding impact because as the pathfinding algorithm proceeds looking for its target, it will take longer and longer to get over here. So everything they're looking for is in the main shaft. Now that's not true if they're in the temple. I think we'll probably flood this floor first. Har. We'll leave that ramp till I'm sure somebody can get the last square here removed. And then I think we'll cheat a little. We'll disassemble one of the walls, build the ramp up here and go up on top, and build an overhang around the top to prevent any climbers from getting atop the area. And then we'll go back down and rebuild the wall. And it'll be sealed again, nothing can climb on top. And if we decide to build atop it later, we can. No big deal. But I'm not going to mess with it for now. And we leave the one ramp behind because anybody who falls in the pit needs a way back out. Now I make them take the long way around because the intent is that the moat is a technical disadvantage if someone decides they want to climb down or fall down into it. Realistically, climbers can probably jump up and climb right out. But I don't want to go deeper because I may want to expand this area, and if I do at any point and we go deeper, I'll have cut this off. It'll just be surrounded. In order to expand it in this layer, we would have to go down a floor, go out, come back up with a staircase on the outside of the moat, go that way. Which is doable, but it's a little roundabout. We'll mark that garbage dump as restricted because otherwise the dwarves have a tendency to climb down there. We'll remove the ramp on the lower floor. We need to provide access, so we'll need to dig out at least one square that will provide access to the lower floor. And then we can remove the ramp. Those trees are kind of in the way, so I'm hoping we can cut them down and eliminate the root problem. There we go. Okay, that's a lot of designation without any speech, so let's talk about what we're doing here and why we're doing it. Sorry about that, but this is kind of something you want to take your time and think through a little bit before you get started. This is going to be our hospital. We haven't built a dormitory, we haven't built a well, it's been several months. We probably need our dwarves a bed, at least, some kind of bed. Probably should do that, like, sooner rather than later. So our hospital will double up as a dorm. But this area is going to be our wells. Wells plural, because if dwarves are using the well, then other dwarves can't. So if you have more than one, there's no wait. There's always a well available, and I go 4 just because it's convenient and pretty. Now the way this works is very simple. Water will come in on the left, pass through this device here, which I'll explain in a moment, enter the square well chamber, flood down to the bottom of the well, flood out through the drain chamber, drain tunnel if we haven't blocked it off, and then we'll have an excavation here which will allow them to drain off the map if we haven't plugged it. That will allow us to drain the well if we need to do so for any reason in the future. We'll build a bridge right here that will raise and close this off so that this doesn't have to fill every time we fill the well. The well is multiple levels deep and comprised mostly of up-down staircases, which will fill with water, but are only there to provide dwarves a means of transit in the unlikely event that anybody falls in. Realistically, if they fall in, they're probably falling all the way to the bottom, they're going to be stunned, they're going to inhale water, and they're going to drown at the bottom of the well, at which point we're going to drain it, remove the corpse, refill it. You get how that's going to go. Realistically, falling into the well doesn't happen very often, but we're prepared if it does. Now, we'll also build grates over this here, and the reason is this is our enemy restriction. Prevents anything from getting in because it can't destroy buildings from below on this Z level. At the very top here, we'll have a bridge that will cut off water access. Now we'll link this up to the river, maybe even via multiple paths into this first chamber, so that we get good flow into our intake. We'll be able to seal this up with a bridge. A retracting bridge over the stairs or a raising bridge doesn't much matter, but the raising bridge is easier to deal with from inside, while the retracting bridge is smaller to build, and usually, unless you opt for a small raising bridge, I guess. You can't crush anybody with a retracting bridge either if you have anybody operating in this and you screw up. Realistically, I normally use a raising bridge. You can build them smaller, and that's kind of efficient. So, water will flow in from the intake, down the staircases to this point, across, up, through the enemy restrictor, and then over to this device, which I promised I would explain. This is a pressure regulator. See, water in Dwarf Fortress obeys a lazy but effective model for pressure. Water falling from height is effectively under pressure that causes it to return to nearly the height that it was when it fell. Think of this like water flooding up through a U-bend in your sink. It's higher on one side than it is on the other, so when it comes in from the sink, it floods down and it's under enough pressure to flood through the U-bend and out the other side. This is a similar model. As water floods in, it will be under the same pressure that it was up top, which is, what, Z level 0? We get Z level 0 at the water? No, Z level -1. Okay, so it's going to try and reach, I think, Z level -2 by default, unless you put a screw pump to it. So the problem with that is that if we don't have the pressure regulator, the water will drop down, flood through the enemy restrictor, flood over here, enter the wells, fill the well, and then immediately flood up through the well and start flooding the fortress. Over this way, and then all the way back up, filling every floor one at a time, all the way up back to here. At which point you've basically lost the entire fortress because we flooded it. There's not a good way to stop this based on the way I've done the floor plans. So you have to be careful to make sure that you are restricting the water flow to the level you want it. Water that passes through a pressure regulator, which is any diagonal, and I'll explain why I built it this way in just a moment. Any diagonal acts as a pressure regulator that limits the water force back to the level it was when it passed through the diagonal. So, water on the left is at -2. It'll try to get all the way back up top. Water on the right, pass through all these diagonals, it only needs one, but pass through all these diagonals is it now at negative 19. It would only try to get to this floor. It's going to wash across, obviously. Pressure-wise, if it floated down, it wouldn't try to get back up any higher. So it's at this point, it's safe. This water will flow in, but it won't try to rise up out of the well and flood our fortress. We have nullified the river pressure. Now, the reason I've done it like this is so that the water flow in is as unrestricted as possible, allowing us to fill the well with the maximum speed we can. Since this is coming in from a 3 wide, we're going into 3 diagonals, and then into 4, because to go to 2 would narrow us a little bit, out to 4, and then back into 3, which then floods into the well. Now that's my idea to get maximum flow through here. You follow me? The pressure regulator on this side over here with the stairs probably isn't necessary. It's mostly aesthetics for my purposes. Sanity, paranoia, call it what you like. Realistically, if we've done this properly, water never rises above this level. We shouldn't have an issue. If we somehow manage to hook up a screw pump to this later, then the diagonals here will protect us from our own stupidity, at least for them. It won't help us with the well itself. So if we hooked up the screw pump to the well directly, then we'd be able to pump water up through the wells and into a fortress, etc., 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 all the way back to wherever Z level +1. Okay, so the well gives us easy access for a hospital to get water to clean our dwarves' wounds. It doubles as a dormitory while we're getting bedrooms prepared. Nice all around. Alright, and the burial crypts are almost ready. I still have to name the starting 7. I haven't done that yet. And we should have a few coffins, which we can place. Probably should brew some of those plants. Pretty good, actually. This is a new one. We started with the new tile set. A lot of detail up close. If you zoom into your fort, you want to get a good screenshot or you want to look at something in particular, it's got a lot of real fine detail. At the level I tend to play at, most of that detail is unfortunately lost even in the resolution I'm playing at before it's downscaled for you guys. Yeah, this is Vettlinger's tile set. It's nice, but the problem is that it's just I don't tend to play at a distance where a 32 tile set helps me. It's a lot of it gets lost. It's not to say all of it gets lost. There's a lot of fine detail here that does stand out, but the logs, for example, a lot of that tends to start looking like scrubby bushes or herbalism harvesting orders. But it's beautiful up close. I imagine if I were playing in 4K on my desk,
I can't do that there.
that I would appreciate this a great deal more. I'm not sure what I want to do with this fort. I mean, I don't have anything special planned necessarily. Thought maybe once we got up and running, this might be a good fort to sit down and experiment with the. I gotta make a couple things here. We don't have a manager yet. Give me a second here. This is where voice activated voice would be nice, but unfortunately I don't have a dedicated streaming area, so I can't really turn that on full time. And we'll crank out a bunch of pots. Sorry, now where was I? Big plans for the fort. No, not really. The civilizations and raids functionality that was added recently is something I kind of want to experiment with on this fort, probably. Um, I haven't really demonstrated that at all. It'd be nice to implement or to do some of that from this fort. We could have done it on the glacier fort, but it was starting to get to the point where it was crawling. I'm not sure that I should leave. May have to look at reducing my visitor cap. Maybe even reducing my hard dwarf cap even further to prevent some, or the soft cap and the hard cap, in order to prevent some of the frame rate loss issues we were really kind of running into. Even with fast dwarf, it was taking a long time to get the things done. We just had a lot of not just travel time, but a lot of labor to get done. And by the time we were done with the temples and taverns, we end up with a dwarves taking more leisure time than they used to. So they don't get things done as fast as they once did. So things I would have accomplished previously in a couple of seasons end up being more like a year, or a year and a half. Your dwarves take a lot of time drinking, socialize, and you really do have to give it to them. It's not something you should try to deprive them of. Uh, but there's a lot of time that they spend doing things that interfere with the getting done. Cloth and clothiers workshops. Let's go back and check on our hospital here. It's further down. Okay, looks like the well is probably dug out now. Yep. Looks like we're good to go here, so we'll build our bridge. Well, to be fair, we hadn't tried Adam smashing our junk. We have the fortress. We can go back to it. But I've been teasing the new tile set for a while. And make no mistake, I like it. I love these nice crisp lines on the tiles. Oh, right. All those animals we confiscated. I'm sorry. All that meat on a hoof waiting to be processed is what I meant to say. Let's double check on our butchering area. Gonna have to keep an eye on this. If we're not careful, nobody will come along and deal with the skins.
I can't do that there.
Yeah, the drudgery cast. You laugh, but it makes all my once I'm up and running, it makes my crafters far more efficient if they're not trudging around picking up every boulder on their own. Just bang, bang, bang. They grind through stuff really quick at that point. So in this location, with this biome set, we have enough material to build a more traditional forge workshop while we're waiting to dive for magma. Let's go back to using Dwarven radar and see if we can't locate that second cave. Make sure we're where we think we are. Trying to do this in the safest way possible. Which is to smooth the walls and cut fortifications in them so that your dwarves can see through the fortifications. At no time are your dwarves exposed to anything other than potential flooding. And we know it's not a flooding thing because there's buildable terrain there. We just stopped one short, basically. Huh. Whoops. Our fortress just crashed on us. We just lost a bunch of progress. Grumble, grumble, grumble. If this one is like Region 1, we'll be starting another fort in short order. I'm not going to do the whole crashes and loses his entire season on a regular basis thing. Oh, wow. We back to the well. Well. Okay. Well, while I'm waiting on them, I'm going to run and grab a soda real fast. Dig faster, my little ants! Dig faster! I do like the little touches, like the detail on the coffins. By smoothing the edge, and you can't actually mine the edge, by smoothing the edge and cutting fortifications, however, water will flow off the map through the fortifications, allowing you to drain an infinite supply of water out of the well at any point you like. This will allow us to drain the system in the event that we need to service it for any reason. And this will be used to actually form one of the walls of our well. We'll seal this up when we're using it as drinking water, and then we'll drop it in the event that we actually need to drain the well for any reason. Keep in mind, we have to drain the entire intake tunnel as well. So a nice fast drain is a good thing. Oh, I know what we haven't showed off yet. We haven't done a dwarven water reactor to power millstones. That's something we could do. And we should probably go ahead and start thinking about that tavern. Darn it, one short. Barracks, tavern. Outside an exclusion zone that's dwarves only, so we can lock this off from everyone else. Now we'll look at having a public library, say off the temple, and then we'll have a private library inside the fortress. It looks like somebody's over there starving, which means there's somebody needs to be butchered. And the bunny probably needs to be assigned to the temporary pasture. screwed up, slaughtered the boar by mistake. Oh no, he's up there. Oh, good. Whew. Oh, man, killed my pig? That sucks. Okay, we're good. A few grazers taking up space, and we're ready to get rid of them. It goes pretty good, mate. Welcome aboard. Dwarf Fortress in the name of charity. Every day all the way through November 2nd. We're going to do this. And this will give us nest box space, something we really hadn't considered before now. Burial chamber is ready. Well's almost done. Got to build the bridges for that. Tavern. Didn't build the levers yet. May reverse that and throw some of these guys into an archery squad here in a bit. But for now, we're going with this. I think that'll get me what I want. You only had one miner? I want to turn off tallow so it's available for soap. All right. The good news is we know that these blocks are too short and we've got to go one more level in. The bad news is we got to mine them out again. Gotta forbid all the rocks on the other side of the grate because I don't want someone to go after a boulder and get stuck when the grates get built in behind them. Once these grates are in place, we will have done everything we need to do to prepare our fortress for a puncture. I will suspend one of them for the time being because we still have to link up the bridge to the intake. We haven't finished excavating our drain. We haven't linked up that bridge there. And now we have the architecture to build all these bridges. Metalsmithing needs 3 floors. Or workshops, you can kind of combine them. Bars, you can kind of combine them. Finished products, that is to say, weapons, armor, trap components, etc., etc., etc. I don't think so, mate. This is all sound sense stuff. This stuff's been around since before Kerbal was a thing.
Dwarf says he has an amazing idea, but it'll probably be useless.
Let's see if we've got the workshop for him. Feymood is good. Nope, doesn't look like we do. Now I'm going to use this just to show children, because they don't show in the standard labor thing. I want to see what his highest labor is. not turn it on? Maybe that's not the right option. There it is. Don't display children or babies is up there. Duh. Okay. Sorry, I normally hide kids because I can't. You can't set labors on them, so I don't bother with them. Let's see. Sigan apparently has no skills. What's his strange mood for? Crafter. Okay, so wood crafter. Which we did, but lost in the crash.
I claim this workshop in the name of invention!
Well, that didn't take long. Probably just a chunk of wood and nothing else. Okay, so now we need to think about where we're going to put that. And generally speaking, I like an idea putting a museum off of the dining hall, tavern, barracks complex. Defense nearby, traps nearby, dogs nearby. Large number of dwarves potentially to detect any intruders. Then you have the private library, then you have museums. Okay, lots of crafts to be done. That's another good one for the military to do. There's almost always going to be room to make mugs. Uh-uh. So this will be the public library, private library, museums, each room being a separate museum space. Double walled so that it can be engraved. Got rid of one too many there. Okay, so we've got the drains set up. Now we need to make sure this will have a lever that can operate it. Okay, guys. Well, come on, Clinitive. I gotta warn myself in case I forget between sessions. What does this bridge do? Is it dangerous if I, operate in the vicinity of dwarves? Is it dangerous if I operate in the vicinity of enemies? Does it run the risk of flooding my fortress? Could it create a magma flood and ruin my day? Is it super awful bad fun time? Of course it's ominous. It should be ominous. A little ominous. Maybe a bit. A bit.
No.
Okay, guys, as it is 11:30 plus, like going on 11:45 now, I'm going to call it for this evening. I'll be back tomorrow at 8 p.m., just like we have been for the past, most of the past 24 nights now. Uh, it should be about that time all weekend long. We might go a little short on Saturday, but we ran a little long tonight, so it makes up for it. Otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow night at 8 p.m. For those of you who have the means and the time, please take a moment to pop down below the stream, where you will find a link to my Extra Life campaign page. All of the money being collected for this is going to charity. None of it is being collected for me. All of it is going to help sick kids. The help you provide today helps people like me be here to provide the things that we do. 40 years ago, I was a patient at the same hospital that I am now raising money for. Now, before I go, does anybody have any questions? I suspect for adventure mode, this is absolutely an awesome tile set because you're not going to need to see this much space in adventure mode. Your character usually isn't going to be able to see that far. Trees, buildings, daylight, the amount of obstructions you run into in terms of vision is just, you're not going to normally need to see this much space. At which point you're playing it as higher zoom. You're going to be appreciating the additional detail in terms of what it shows you of your dwarf and enemies. They really are quite pretty up close. Alright, guys. I will see you tomorrow night.